Every empire was built on it. Every war was fought for it. Every civilization that lost it vanished. Before gold, before fiat, before Bitcoin, there was land, the oldest form of wealth, the first currency, and the most brutal measure of power. If you love the real stories behind money and power, hit like and subscribe before we go on. Now, let's dive in. We talk about digital scarcity like it's a new invention, like Bitcoin was the first time humans turned math into value. But long before blockchain, there was another immutable ledger, carved not into code, but into soil. Land was the original hard asset, finite, visible, unforgeable, the one thing that couldn't be printed, mined, or cloned. And because of that, every system that came after gold, credit, fiat, crypto, has been a desperate attempt to recreate what land already was, a store of value backed by reality. Money was born because not everyone could own land. It was a receipt for access. But the truth never changed. Land wasn't created to serve money. Money was created to serve land. In ancient Egypt, wealth wasn't counted in coins. It was counted in acres along the Nile. Floodplains were value. Harvests were liquidity. Pharaohs didn't hoard metal. They hoarded territory. Whoever controlled the soil controlled life. Fast forward to Rome. The Senate distributed conquered land as latifundia. Vast estates worked by slaves. Land wasn't just income. It was citizenship, collateral, and status, rolled into one. And when Rome collapsed, the currency it left behind wasn't gold coins. It was feudalism. Europe's dark ages weren't defined by ignorance, but by ownership. The king owned the crown, the church owned the land, and everyone else owned nothing. You could work a field for 40 years and still die owing rent to someone who had never touched the soil. That exclusivity was its genius. The blockchain of the Middle Ages wasn't digital, it was written in law, lineage, and violence. That system didn't end because it failed. It ended because it became too obvious. The peasants revolted, the merchants rose, and by the time capitalism arrived, land had evolved, not disappeared. The Industrial Revolution was financed on land mortgages. Banks didn't lend against ideas, they lent against acres. Factories were built on collateral. Railroads laid across purchased rights of way. Even Britain's first government bonds, the consols, were backed by land rents. When capitalism claimed it had replaced feudalism, it was lying. It simply monetized it. Land became financialized, chopped into parcels, titled, taxed, and securitized. The feudal lord became the landlord. The serf became the tenant. Different names, same dependency. Because every time humanity creates a new form of wealth, we rebuild the same hierarchy. Gold was just condensed land. Mined scarcity. Fiat was land abstracted promises to pay rent in paper. And now Bitcoin, for all its radical promise, is digital land. Finite, mined, owned and defended by code instead of soldiers. Scarcity never died. We just learned how to simulate it. You can feel it in how people talk about Bitcoin. Digital real estate, unforgeable property, freedom from the state. All language pulled straight from feudal DNA. Because deep down, humans still crave one thing, ownership that outlives them. Bitcoiners call it self-sovereignty. The nobles of old called it a title. Different tools, same impulse. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Even in a digital age, power belongs to whoever controls the ground you stand on. Crypto wealth, stock wealth, paper wealth. It all flows back into real estate. When the winners take profits, where do they park them? Land. When inflation hits, what holds value best? Land. And when markets crash, what do central banks buy to stabilize everything? Mortgages, claims on land. You can't eat Bitcoin. You can't live inside a share certificate. But you can sleep on land, plant on it, defend it. Because land isn't an asset, it's the stage where every other asset performs. We like to think money evolves, that technology makes us freer. But zoom out, and you'll notice the same cycle repeating across centuries. First comes land, then credit, then collapse. And when the paper burns, we run back to the only thing that can't be printed: dirt. It happened after the South Sea bubble in the 1700s, after the crashes of 1929 and 2008. Every digital boom ends in a physical rush back to real property. That's not superstition, it's gravity. Because while currencies inflate, technologies change, and empires fall, land just sits there, quietly compounding. Today, the value of all the world's real estate is over $380 trillion more than the global stock and bond markets combined. Every financial product, every line of code we've ever invented still sits beneath a ceiling made of land. It's the real reserve currency, the collateral behind civilization. The modern world likes to pretend ownership is fluid, that we've moved beyond the old hierarchies, but the top 10% of humanity now owns more than 85% of the world's land value. That's not a coincidence. That's the persistence of feudalism, hidden behind market prices and mortgage contracts. We call it a housing market, but that's a polite lie. It's not a market, it's a sorting mechanism. Real estate doesn't just shelter people, it shelters capital. The wealthy don't buy homes to live in them. They buy them to store money that needs a physical anchor in a digital storm. In cities like London, Vancouver, and New York, entire neighborhoods have turned into vaults, windows dark, doors locked, owned by shell companies and offshore trusts. It's not housing. It's collateral with a skyline, and the whole system depends on it. Without real estate, most modern credit would vanish overnight. Mortgages are what turn potential into liquidity. That's why interest rates are the true ruler of modern life. They're not just about money, they're about land access. Raise them, and the gates close. Lower them, and the bidding wars begin. We call it economic policy, but it's closer to land rationing. And the principle hasn't changed since the first medieval charter. The few own, the many rent. We just replaced the manor house with a mortgage. And here's what makes the Bitcoin comparison sting. Bitcoin was supposed to break the monopoly, a decentralized ledger, a finite supply, a network outside politics. But the longer it lived, the more it looked like the world it tried to replace. The early adopters became the landlords of cyberspace. They mined first, accumulated most, and now rent out their holdings. And when those profits were made, they flowed back into the real world. Crypto gains became condos, tokens became titles. Because at the end of every digital illusion, the winners cash out into the same physical scarcity, land. From the Pharaohs to the metaverse, power has always been territorial. Even Apple, Google, and Amazon measure their dominance not just in code, but in land footprint, massive campuses, data centers, real estate portfolios. Because no matter how digital life becomes, control still requires dirt. So the next time someone tells you Bitcoin is digital gold, remind them gold was only valuable because it came from land. And when the markets crash, when the servers go dark, it won't be the blockchain that feeds you. It'll be the soil someone else owns. Land was the first asset. It will be the last. Because no matter how fast we innovate, they're not making any more of it. Thank you for watching all the way to the end. If this gave you a new perspective on how money and power really work, hit like and subscribe, because history always has the answers. You just have to know where to look. Thanks for watching.